Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another installment of MediaPost webinar series. I'm Mike Winkleman, Content Director for Bespoke by MediaPost, and we have a great presentation for all of you today, put together by our friends at the performance TV company Mountain. MediaPost webinars bring together the media, marketing, and advertising community to learn more about the methodologies and technologies that make effective business possible across a variety of categories, brought to you by our industry's top solutions providers, marketers, and practitioners. Leading today's webinar will be Eric Hatzenbuhler, Mountain's Senior Digital Marketing Manager. Today's webinar is titled, Your Digital Strategy is Missing One Thing, High Impact TV Creative. During the next hour, Eric will show you how high impact TV creative can create a positive performance ripple effect across your existing digital strategies. And he'll demonstrate how to translate what works on paid search and social into tactics you can use on CTV. He'll also take a look at how marketers are currently approaching video and other digital channels in order to offer some real-world insights into how to harness those strategies for a high-impact, performance-driven CTV campaign. Before we get started, just a reminder, after the presentation, we'll have some time for a Q&A session. You can submit your questions at any time during Eric's presentation in the question box that you'll find on the GoToWebinar interface on your screen. With that, let's turn the presentation over to Eric. Eric, take it away.
Thanks so much, Mike. Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Hatzenbuhler, as Mike mentioned, Senior Digital Marketing Manager here at Mountain. My job is to oversee all of our paid media efforts. I worked in the agency world for a number of years prior to my time at Mountain, coming up on 2 years now. And yeah, so I'm a marketer at heart. I oversee all of our paid search, paid social, programmatic, display, audio, and of course, CTV campaigns through our own Mountain platform. So really excited to share with you from a marketer's perspective how we utilize CTV and really tie it together with our other existing digital strategies, and ultimately what the impact of that looks like, because we do think about this as a really cohesive marketing mix and strategy. So let's dive right into it. For the most part, today's agenda, as this title sort of alluded to of the webinar, is going to be talking about how digital ties into CTV and how you can take a lot of the existing strategies and initiatives you've implemented on digital campaigns across paid search and paid social, bring them into your CTV channel through the Mountain platform, and run really successful high impact campaigns. So talking about bringing those digital strategies into the living room, ultimately talking about how high impact creative really fuels success in the CTV space, some ways that you can take existing digital tactics to avoid ad fatigue, and ultimately into how CTV has an impact on other ad channels, and we'll share some statistics around that we've collected. So kicking things off, obviously the TV screen, the biggest screen in the home, as we call it, it's something that historically, when we think about linear TV, has been reserved for the cream of the crop brands. It's been expensive. It's not super measurable. When we think about digital marketing historically relative to how TV ads have been purchased, there's a massive gap there. And that gap doesn't exist anymore with connected television and CTV advertising. So we're really focused on, yes, the TV screen is great for driving reach and brand awareness. There's no denying that. But it is also a performance marketing channel in the same way that paid search and paid social are. You have that precision targeting at the audience level. You have the ability to test and optimize different creative assets, and ultimately the insight on the measurement side to really understand the performance and ultimately take some of those insights and actions away from CTV and implement them broadly across not only your digital campaigns, but also your business. You may find learnings from these campaigns that open up new opportunities for your organization. So one thing we really want to talk about in terms of the difference between CTV and digital channels is high impact creative. And what do we mean by high impact creative? Well, first things first, chances are that video ads will catch your attention a little bit more than a static display or text ad. We've seen sort of the video revolution across all of digital in the last few years, and research really shows why, in that consumers retain 95% of what they see in a video versus 10% of what they read in a static ad. That's a pretty significant difference. So not only do you have the ability to leverage video across all of your digital channels, but with CTV, again, you're bringing it into the TV screen, into the living room, which has historically brought a prestige and sort of a level of credibility that other ad placements don't have. We still think about the TV as, like we sort of mentioned, the cream of the crop, or the top of the line in terms of ad placements. Users are consuming long form content when they're watching TV. They're used to seeing ads that are high quality and really attention grabbing, where we tend to put ad blockers and blinders on a little bit when we're looking at paid social and our attention spans are shorter. In the TV screen, you really have that captivating audience. So the high impact nature of the placement, but also the video that you're leveraging, can really drive some strong performance for you that you won't get from other traditional digital channels. So then we talk about purpose-built creative, and this is where the digital component of your CTV strategy and approach really ties together. So, when we think about how we run ads on digital channels, we're constantly optimizing, whether that be different landing pages, different CTAs, call to actions, what text we're using, what imagery we're using. We're constantly swapping that out, A/B testing, and trying to find the creative that performs best for the audience that we're targeting. And we sort of think of this as purpose-built creative, and the ability to leverage that within the Mountain CTV platform is something that, as a digital marketer, I absolutely love, but also makes it really easy to make that transition into CTV if this is going to be a new channel for you. Thinking about sort of leveraging and developing that hook within your creative, where the first 3 to 5 seconds are really important to catch your audience and captivate them. When we think about the purpose-built aspect of that, you may have various audiences from, I'll use a clear example of Gen Z versus baby boomer generations. Each of those are going to react very differently to different creative. One creative that really hooks in the Gen Z population probably isn't going to hook the baby boomer generation in the same way. So how can you think about developing creative that's specifically tailored for each of those audiences and really captivates them and grabs their attention, and ultimately drives them to the action that you're looking for within that campaign or for your business? So one hot tip that we sort of like to say when we think about digital campaigns and ad types, oftentimes that call to action is prominently featured. It's a learn more button, buy now, shop today, and it's very obvious that that's the action we want the user to take when they're seeing a paid social ad or a paid search ad. But keeping a CTA prominent throughout the video on a CTV placement is also very valuable and important. So making sure that the user understands what it is you want them to do sort of after visiting this ad, whether that's or seeing the ad, whether that's visiting your website, purchasing a product, reading an article, signing up for maybe an early access program, whatever that looks like. Keeping that CTA sort of featured in some sort of way throughout the video is really important, and you see sort of the statistics there and the data to back that up. When we do see CTAs featured prominently throughout the video, 41% lower average cost per view and 112% higher average conversion rate for those videos compared to those that don't prominently feature that CTA. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about what does my creative look like on CTV, or how can I potentially leverage some existing creative on the paid social side. Find a way to integrate a CTA into that video. You'll really see the impacts there on the performance side. So the next couple of slides, what I want to dive into and sort of take a step back from the creative aspect just for a moment and think about the marketing funnel as a whole. And again, this is where myself as a digital advertiser and marketer really enjoys what the Mountain CTV platform has to offer. So I think about everything we do in terms of a funnel, as I'm sure most of you do as well, where we have our prospecting audience at the top. We have our middle of the funnel where we think of, maybe CRM data, maybe lookalike audiences fall into that, although in my opinion, those tend to be a little bit further upper funnel than CRM, for example. And then ultimately at the bottom of the funnel, we have the traditional retargeting, reaching out to existing customers, or targeting ads to users who have visited your website. So I want to start with prospecting and talk about how sort of the top of the funnel works within CTV. There's some data on the right-hand side that we've collected from our own platform, 389 advertisers that launched prospecting-only campaigns in 2022. And you can really see the impact in some of these metrics over the first 60 to 75 days. Visit rates, meaning the number of users who visit your website after being exposed to a Mountain ad, increased substantially within those first 75 days in particular. And we see a similar increase in your return on ad spend within CTV. So, understanding what your potential growth looks like based on the data around other advertisers in the CTV space can be really important if you're launching prospecting for the first time on a new channel like CTV. But what I like to talk about here is, we think about the upper funnel prospecting tactics across digital as tactics that are focused on engaging with customers who aren't familiar with your brand, exposing your brand to net new individuals, getting them to your website for the first time potentially, or at least getting them aware of who you are because they likely fill or have some sort of need, that we've identified either via an interest audience or maybe contextual, in market. For whatever reason, they are interested in your product and service, and you're trying to reach out to them. So we treat these users on CTV much the same way we do across other digital channels. And that's not to say that it's just awareness focused or just focused on engagement, but we also see direct response performance and ultimately customer acquisition and true performance goals in the form of conversions, revenue, cost per acquisition with this audience. So thinking about not only generating awareness, of course, but really setting goals against these audiences that are focused on driving a more true action that you're looking for, again, whether that be a point of purchase or more of a lead generation. Of course, for us on the Mountain side, we use this for lead generation. We see conversion volume from prospecting audiences, even as a standalone campaign. So this is something that, again, mimicking your digital strategy that you have maybe existing in paid social channels for prospecting, bringing that into connected TV and implementing a very similar structure, even in maybe how your campaigns are broken out by audience type, is really, really impactful. We break out our own prospecting campaigns into a few different buckets that we've identified as really high value because we want to have the ability to serve those audiences really specific creative and ultimately set the budget against each of those audiences with a little bit more control. So think about mimicking that strategy within the CTV platform that you're using on paid social. Middle of the funnel, as I talked about, is really about tapping into CRM data within the Mountain platform. And this is an incredibly powerful tool. Something that, again, you think of the television screen and the accuracy of placements, the amount of potential wasted spend linear television has brought to advertisers in the past and historically, where you're serving against specific programming that you're hoping your audience is watching. The best example I always use is if you watch golf on the weekend, almost every ad that you see will be some sort of business. But guess what? I work in B2B and I don't only watch golf. I consume a lot of different content. So the ability to leverage your own CRM data to target those users, no matter what they're watching, wherever they're watching on CTV, is really, really important. So, again, the creative aspect here of think about what creative this audience may want to see, what that call to action may be relative to a prospecting audience. These users are potentially users that have engaged or purchased from your brand in the past. What do you want to do to potentially upsell them, cross-sell them, bring them back? Or is there some sort of loyalty program that you can install to maintain customer retention and repeat purchasers? Some of those may be applicable to your business, some may not. But finding ways to leverage the data you've collected, your own first-party data with CRM on CTV can be incredibly powerful because it just opens up, an audience that, again, has traditionally been stuck in paid search and paid social channels to the TV screen. And we've talked about the prestige that brings, having your brand appear on the largest screen in the house. So we leverage CRM data consistently. We see great performance from it. It's something that I absolutely recommend for any brands that it makes sense to do so. And then of course, at the bottom of the funnel, we have retargeting. We're all familiar with retargeting and how it sort of works. We're looking at driving impressions against users who have visited our website. And ultimately, we want to drive them to purchase. Maybe we're looking at increasing their AOV, or if they have purchased a product, how we can sort of get them to purchase a complementary product, or again, repeat purchasers, whatever might be applicable for your business. The important thing to remember here is that retargeting and prospecting, each on their own, can drive performance for you, but when you put them together, the impact is really staggering. And that's what we're showing on the right-hand side here of, advertisers who launch with retargeting in addition to prospecting see much stronger visit rates and return on ad spend over those first 90 days of their campaigns being active on the Mountain platform. And you can see the difference there. So don't think of CTV as solely a brand awareness channel anymore. It is a performance driver. It drives results, not only in terms of the brand equity you can potentially gain, but true results in terms of conversion action, conversion value, and ultimately return on ad spend for your business. So think about integrating retargeting alongside prospecting, CRM, in your CTV strategies, much the same way you likely have within paid social. Take that same sort of funneled approach, bring it to connected television, and implement it, because you have the knowledge and ability to do so, and you'll see that performance as a result. So then when we talk about, I mentioned ad fatigue a little bit earlier, talking about creative and diving back into the high impact creative aspect. This is a really powerful tool against ad fatigue. And we've all seen and heard the same ad over and over and over again. So we want to avoid that on the CTV, on the TV screen for your brand and organization. And this is where, dynamic creative, in the sense of having different creative for each of your audiences, tailored for a purpose, can help avoid ad fatigue. If you're running the same video across every single audience that we just talked about, then your likelihood of that user experiencing ad fatigue is very high. And it's not very impactful or efficient from a performance standpoint, because as we mentioned with the generation example of Gen Z versus baby boomer, that applies the same to prospecting versus CRM. Those users are going to be very impacted very differently based on the CTA, what you may be showing them. I'll use the example of a retailer. If you have an electronics brand, category versus apparel, you're not going to want to show just general brand video to each of those. You want to get as tailored and specific as possible. And then even within those categories, you may have men's apparel, baby, women's. You can sort of break out all of those individually. You may even have subcategories under that. So thinking about developing numerous creative variations that are all purpose driven can be really, really important, not only for the obvious performance impacts, but for avoiding ad fatigue as well. And what I will say is creative refreshes don't have to blow up your budget anymore. So much of our video consumption nowadays is really, I don't want to say low quality, but low cost produced video. It's so easy to grab a phone and shoot a video and have it look great. And it's more important for your brand to have something than to wait and wait and wait to produce one variation that's incredibly high quality. Because guess what? That one variation is going to run for a couple weeks against your entire audience, as I mentioned, and they're going to get burnt out on it. So it's more important to have more, still high quality, but larger quantities and a broader variation of video nowadays. And there are a lot of tools that can help support that. A few of those are Mountain's, of course, Quick Frames, Creator Marketplace, and ultimately Mountain's Creative as a subscription option are both really cost-effective ways to produce video at scale and create massive variation in your video that's really purpose-driven. So if you're interested in learning more about either of those, of course, reach out to us and we'll be happy to talk through those. But you don't worry about creating the perfect ad anymore. I understand if you're driving to something like the Super Bowl for an event, but for the most part, evergreen creative, seasonal creative, anything that can be really high impactful and performance driven, users are used to consuming video shot with a phone nowadays. So that doesn't appear out of place on the TV screen anymore. And what I really want to talk about is the high impact CTV creative has on other digital marketing channels. So this is what I alluded to at the start, what we call the halo effect of really positive, strong performing CTV campaigns, not only driving performance in themselves, but driving performance across other channels as well, particularly in the digital space. And this is, again, an analysis of our own first-party data, advertisers using the Mountain platform. And what we've really found is that there are significant impacts on both paid social and paid search compared to those users when they weren't running CTV, or those advertisers, I should say. So when we're looking at paid social, we see almost 50% longer average session duration when those brands were running CTV compared to when they were not on paid social, and a 9% higher conversion rate for paid social after adding Mountain to their marketing mix. On the paid search side, still really significant numbers here, 19% longer average session duration with CTV as part of their mix compared to not, and a 22% higher conversion rate for paid search after adding Mountain. So these are really staggering numbers, and think about how for your brand, you may even be able to tie all of this together with a cohesive message, where the creative and the message that you may be putting out there in your CTV ad is also the same messaging in CTA you're leveraging on paid social, leveraging on paid search, and ultimately now you're creating this web of a really cohesive message for each of these specific audiences that they may even be more likely to click on your ad, more likely to purchase, and you're just seeing the impact that the TV screen has on all of the other channels that you're running. So don't think about CTV even in its own silo. And I don't recommend thinking about any channel in your marketing mix in its silo. They all impact each other, but the data here showing the impacts of CTV on social and search are really, really staggering. So understand that adding CTV to your mix isn't just adding a net new channel that is going to drive performance in itself. You're also increasing the performance of your existing channels. And we have a case study with Rumple that we love to talk about, of course, because it's so impactful and it's so representative of that last slide, really in action with a specific brand. And they were just really unhappy with some of the inefficiencies they were seeing in their paid social performance. So launching CTV through the Mountain platform really allowed them to, capitalize on some recent hyper growth, but also reaching new audiences. And importantly, like we do across other digital channels, targeting those audiences in a really specific way. So the ability to leverage our partnerships with Oracle Data Cloud, or leverage your CRM data, retargeting on the TV screen, having your impressions and your campaigns be audience focused really allows you to control the message to each of those audience segments, instead of just, like I said, throwing your ad on golf and hoping that you're reaching someone who's in B2B. The TV screen has evolved beyond that now, and we see the performance impacts not only within CTV but other channels. Another thing that was really impactful that Rumple leveraged and a lot of our advertisers leverage, of course, is the real-time metrics with the Google Analytics integration. So this allows users to not only understand the performance impacts, of course, that we provide within the reporting dashboards in the Mountain platform, but how Mountain is tying into other channels and your site data that you're tracking through Google Analytics. So that integration is very helpful and impactful, allows you to just see Mountain just like you would any other digital platform and channel, analyze those results in real time, understand how Mountain is performing relative to other channels, direct, organic. Having all of that in one cohesive location is really, really vital. The audience segmentation learnings, that second to last bullet, is something I, as a digital marketer, absolutely love. There are a lot of platforms out there where you may want to add 10 or 20 audience segments to a single campaign. And once you do that, the performance insight you get is rolled up at the campaign level. And you may not get any detail into which of those specific audience segments is driving better performance than any other. You just see it at the campaign level, and the only way to really test that would be to create a separate campaign for each individual audience segment. That's a lot of work. That's not the most efficient way to spend your advertising dollars on that channel. You want to allow the algorithms and the optimizations to do their job, and that isn't the best way to do it. Within the Mountain platform, we actually provide reporting on the audience segmentation level. So what this allowed Rumple to do was actually identify specific audience segments that were performing better than others relative to their average, even though all of those audience segments were maybe part of one individual campaign. And what Rumple ended up doing was actually creating sort of a brand new business unit based on some of this data, because they were seeing really strong performance with the outdoor audience within Mountain, and they sort of took that as a use case and tested it, and they now have an entire outdoor category for their organization. So they literally created a new division of their business, more or less, based on the findings from the Mountain CTV campaigns because of this audience segment level reporting. So just something, again, as we move towards more automation in digital marketing, we tend to lose transparency along with that. And the Mountain platform we're very transparent forward in how we're measuring your campaigns, the types of reporting and data that you have insight into, and ultimately what you do with that. It's not only leverageable, if that's a word, it can't only be leveraged within the CTV platform. You can take those learnings and apply them to your paid social, paid search campaigns, or your business overall, as Rumple did, and really see those impacts. And of course, Rumple also leveraged Mountain's creative as a subscription model. So this was, really allowed them to have a high variety of creative, really hyper-focused, as we mentioned, tailored, purpose-driven creative. So again, something that, if possible, and if you're interested in leveraging, we absolutely mention or recommend that you reach out to us and talk us through that, because that can be really impactful. Just the high variation of creative and what that can do for your brand is really great. And ultimately, Rumple also saw this same halo effect that we just talked about a couple slides ago. So assigning an actual brand against this, Performance TV, looking at their paid search conversion rates 90 days before adding Mountain, sitting at just about 2%. In those 90 days after adding Mountain, paid search conversion rates increased up to 5%, 163% increase in their paid search conversion rates post-Mountain compared to pre-Mountain. Really significant impacts when you think about that at the scale that your paid search campaigns may be driving right now. If you can more than double your conversion rates, you're driving some really significant revenue and efficiency for your business. In addition to paid search, they also saw some really positive impacts on the paid social side. And in particular, Mountain relative to paid social. Campaigns or traffic driven by Mountain actually had a 51% longer average session duration than Facebook. So we were seeing the higher engagement even from the Mountain traffic and users associated with the Mountain campaign than we were through Facebook. The reason for that often being, and what we've sort of hypothesized here is, the attention span of individuals when we're scrolling paid social is very low. So we may see an ad, we may tap on that, but when that takes us away from our scrolling experience, or the time killing that we're doing, waiting in line at a restaurant or wherever we may be scrolling social, you just aren't in the mode of sort of consuming that content and understanding that business, as opposed to the TV screen. When you're sitting down, you're willingly consuming longer form content in the form of a show or sporting event or live TV. So we're just seeing more engagement than social channels when we think about the actual on-site metrics as well. So really positive results here for Rumple. Obviously, on the CTV side alone, really strong performance, but also seeing the impacts across other digital channels. So when we think about today's key takeaways, as we mentioned, kind of connecting the precision of digital, all of the tactics, the funnel approach that you have implemented across paid search and paid social for the last however many years, taking that and applying it to CTV is really, really impactful. It's easy to do. You have the tools and the knowledge as a digital marketer. There's nothing stopping you anymore, especially from the creative aspect, as we've talked about. It's easy to produce high quality creative that users and your audience will interact with and engage with, and will make an impact on them. It doesn't have to break the bank anymore. Number two, of course, Mountain CTV platform just gives brands that ability to drive results, precision targeting. I mentioned the measurement and transparency that we provide relative to a lot of other platforms. As we think about leveraging Mountain's automated algorithms and optimizations, that's really important, but as digital marketers, it's hard to accept that we lose the insight along with that. So understanding where performance is happening, that audience segment level reporting, looking at at performance at the creative level can all really provide some great insights that you can leverage even outside of CTV, ultimately on paid search and social as well. And then ultimately adding CTV to any marketing mix, we've seen the impact of other channels. We've really highlighted search and social here, but the potential impacts on organic search, direct traffic, if you're driving store visits or foot traffic, just the impact that ads on the CTV screen can bring, given the prestige of the television and the sort of credibility that comes along with a brand serving ads on the TV screen is really, really important. And we've sort of identified that impact today and shown some statistics around that. So some really exciting results to add a new channel that's going to drive performance for yourself and also increase performance of your existing campaigns. And with that, we can kick it off with a Q&A.
Okay, Eric, that was great. As I mentioned earlier, and as Eric just said, we have some time for a few questions, and we'll get into that in a minute. I just wanted to remind everybody that during the Q&A session, feel free to keep putting your questions into the question box on the side panel. Also, a quick reminder that you'll get in your email box a copy of today's webinar, as well as the deck from today's presentation, so keep an eye out for that. Okay, let's start with this question. Eric, any recommendations for kicking off a CTV campaign if I have a limited budget for video creative?
Yeah, great question. So, what I would say is, what we kind of talked about of leveraging the creative that you can produce. And when I say that, I mean in terms of we're more used now to engaging with video across social channels that are filmed with phones, that are thrown together very quickly and don't require a lot of editing. Today's audiences are used to consuming that. It's not foreign anymore for that to appear on a TV screen and feel out of place. So as I talked about, it's more important to leverage the creative that you have and get creative live than wait and try and produce this perfect ad that, as I mentioned, is only going to run for a couple weeks before people start to get sick of it. So think about how you can produce creative at scale using some of the technology at your fingertips, literally, potentially in your phone, or ultimately leveraging partners like QuickFrames Creator Marketplace, or the Mountain Creative as a subscription offering, as I mentioned. So I think just it's more important to get something live and have variation than it is to have something that's absolutely perfect.
Okay, that makes sense. So what advice would you give a smaller brand that wants to scale video to fuel its CTV campaigns?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, the creative variation is going to be really important, but also just identifying your core audiences and who you want to reach and what desired action you want them to take. We talked about, the generation example, but if you are able to identify as a business a few different personas that really make up your core audience and drive the bulk of your revenue, think about tailoring some creative assets to each of those audiences. And then ultimately within the Mountain platform, you have the ability to segment your campaigns by those different audience buckets. So if you want to, kind of allocate more budget towards your, modern millennial buyer, that's something you can do if you've identified some traits that they bring and you can really resonate with. What product features are they interested in, or what categories are they interested in? Highlighting that in your creative and making sure that really resonates with those audience segments is very important.
Okay. How often do you recommend refreshing or creating CTV spots, and are there limits to how many spots you can have out there at any one time?
Yeah, to answer that last part, no limits. Although we would recommend sort of keeping it within the realm of sort of testing, guidelines. So I should say, if you're within the same audience segment, what I would recommend is maybe having no more than 3 or 4 creative variations live against that segment at any one time. That's sort of mimicking the testing, A/B testing approach that we would apply across paid search and social, where anything beyond that number of variations can start to feel you just sort of hurting yourself in collecting data and the efficiency. Because if you have one creative variation that's performing significantly better, but it's only receiving 10 or 15% of all of your available impressions, that's something that you want to avoid. So I would say within the same audience, sticking within that 3 to 4 variation range would be great. In terms of the number of total variations, assuming that you've sort of segmented your audiences in the way that we've talked about today, there's no limit to the number of different creative variations you could be serving at one time. If you have 35 different business categories and each of those have 4 separate subcategories, assuming that it makes sense from a budget standpoint to sort of get that granular, you could have multiple variations against each of those individual segments. So, that's not something that based on budget we'd maybe recommend. You want the algorithms and the optimizations to have enough data to really, make educated decisions on. And that can get tough if you start to get too granular and small with your audiences and data. But yeah, generally speaking, sky's the limit on the number of variations.
Okay. If I add CTV to my marketing mix, how can I be sure it's CTV that's driving results and not my other channels?
Yeah, great question. So, part of this is just the evolution of measurement associated with CTV and campaigns through the Mountain platform, the ability to understand, transparency reporting that we provide, where we'll give you order IDs directly associated with impressions and traffic driven from Mountain CTV campaigns. Of course, pixel placement is something, Google Analytics integration, your utilization of UTM parameters and tagging. Everything you do across your existing digital channels can be done through the Mountain CTV platform now. So if you are trusting your traffic and the data that you're driving through each of those channels, Mountain is working the exact same way. So think about, CTV as a digital channel. It's that third pillar of performance marketing alongside search and social. So all of the functionality in terms of measurement and transparency works the exact same way. So you can feel really confident in the performance that you're seeing being driven from Mountain. And of course, because it is so digital and trackable, you would have the ability to dive into that yourself, whether within your own business data, within Google Analytics, within the Mountain platform itself. There are a lot of different spots where you can sort of check and QA the performance there and feel really comfortable in the value that Mountain specifically is driving.
Okay. Does CTV really drive better engagement than social? And if so, how?
Yeah, great question. And I think this is one I alluded to a little bit earlier as well of, the mindset of the audience while they're consuming content on the TV screen is very different than the mindset of the audience consuming ads on social or content on social, where, oftentimes we're scrolling through videos or we're looking at memes and we're just kind of killing time. Whereas when we're sitting down at the TV screen, we're engaging with specific long form content, as I mentioned, whether that be a television show, a documentary, live sporting event, whatever it may be, our attention is a little bit more focused. So the engagement rates that we see, not only with the ads themselves, but also with those users once they reach your website, are higher because of, I think, that intent that, or sort of mindset that the user is in the environment that they're consuming that ad. So yes, it does drive stronger performance. We've seen that looking at our own first party data. Again, the integration with Google Analytics is something you can leverage yourself to understand how CTV is performing against your existing channels. It's not something that we try and keep in a silo. We want to integrate Mountain's performance with every other channel in your marketing mix so that you can identify what's performing best and ultimately make the best decisions for you and your business.
Okay, so along those lines, what's the best way to align all these digital channels, search, social, CTV, in order to have them complement each other?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, and I would never advocate myself for only running CTV. Having a broad, cohesive marketing mix is incredibly important nowadays. And I mean that across channels, and I also mean that across the various stages of the funnel. I've worked in the agency days prior to my time at Mountain, worked with a lot of advertisers where they only wanted to run retargeting because that was the most efficient from a return on ad spend standpoint. But we never saw the growth and the scale with those organizations and those businesses that we did with those taking that full funnel approach and expanding beyond to other channels leveraging even channels that you think may not work for your business, finding ways to get creative and get your ads in front of the right audience on that channel can be really impactful as well. So in terms of tying that all together, it's important to just think about all of those channels cohesively. And what I mean by that is implementing similar audience approaches. If you're segmenting your prospecting audience by one way on paid social and a different way on another paid social platform and a different way on paid search and a different way on CTV, there's no cohesive messaging there. There's no ability for you to build purpose-driven creative that you can leverage across all of your initiatives. You're having to sort of find ways to fit, a square peg into a round hole, if you will, with your creative against those individual audiences. So aligning your structures and your audience breakout and your strategies across all of your social channels then allows you to produce cohesive messaging, consistent messaging, put ad sequencing in place where if someone has seen, visited a specific page on your website, you want to serve them a specific piece of creative that is mentioning the products or services on that page. Just making sure that your structure is consistent throughout all of your digital strategy instead of building individual structures within each channel is really, really vital, and will just set you up for more success. And you'll start to see those halo effect impacts that we illustrated today.
Okay, and here's one last question that ties in well to the prestige factor you were talking about before. You said shot on a phone quality content ads are generally accepted, but where do you draw the line? Don't you still want great quality because it's on TV? Then the prestige of TV, as you say.
Sure, it's a great point, and I think there's not any cohesive answer that will apply to every business out there. It depends on what products and services you're selling. As I mentioned, if you're serving ads and your goal is to drive leads for B2B that have a 12-month sales cycle and are really expensive deals, sure, you may want to focus on the quality a little bit more than if you're looking to sell a $10 or $15 product to a Gen Z user. So keep in mind what your audience may resonate with, but ultimately it's all going to be about testing. And that's where I say the variation of creative that you produce is more important than the quality alone. That's not to say quality isn't important, but the ability to produce multiple different variations allows you to test into the performance more than just sort of going in with this general hypothesis that you have around one individual piece of creative. And if that doesn't work or that doesn't resonate well, now you're back at square one and you're starting over, and that might be a 3 to 6 month production process. So that's where I say play around with it a little bit with your business. I've seen really successful B2B advertising campaigns where it is just shot on a webcam on a laptop or with a phone at the office. And on the flip side, obviously we've seen really, really successful campaigns that are incredibly high production value and involve a lot of additional costs and are full production. So it's all about experimentation. The benefit of CTV within your digital mix is just like all of those channels, you have the supporting data and the measurement to back up whatever that hypothesis may be going into it. So if you do want to run and test 4 different variations, maybe one of them is really high quality and a couple others are produced with some lower tech, then you'll get the data on that and you can make a decision within, depending on the volume, as little as 2 weeks to 4 weeks on what works best for you. And you may find that some of the lower quality stuff, or lower tech, I should say, but still good quality, is performing better than the more expensive video you produced in the past. So it's all about testing. Go into it with an open mindset. You'll know, the data will tell you if it works or not. If it doesn't, you understand that impact for your business and what sort of needs to apply to your user base and audience.
Okay, so before we wrap up, Eric, based on the discussion and your thinking behind the scenes as we talk today, do you have any additional final thoughts for the audience?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I've probably hammered this home a little bit today, but thinking about CTV as a performance channel, we've always viewed TV ads as brand awareness only, and they continue to be incredible at that, don't get me wrong. But the ability to measure performance, the impact that we see across other channels, it really is a performance channel in the same way that paid search and paid social are. We see strong CPAs, we see really positive return on ad spend, strong conversion volume directly from those campaigns, in addition to the obvious impact that you have on other channels across your digital marketing mix. So trying to evolve that mindset of, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, where CTV was sort of the thing that was like, yeah, we know it's sort of coming, we know it's in the future, we should probably develop some ads for it at some point, we'll get to it. That time is now, and in all honesty, that time was 6 months to a year ago. You may have competitors that are already live on CTV and driving performance with that channel. So finding ways to leverage your existing creative, as we mentioned, or producing really low cost creative, whether yourself or with a platform like QuickFrame, or with Mountain's Creative as a subscription, just in general, viewing CTV as a performance channel instead of a standalone brand awareness tool is really, really important to just evolve that mindset and think moving forward more as we do as digital marketers, with performance in mind when you're running CTV campaigns.
Okay, it's a great way to wrap it up. One thing I wanted to mention to the audience, if you asked a question and it didn't get answered, don't worry, the folks at Mountain have received all your questions and they can respond to each of you directly after the webinar. Eric, thanks again for a great presentation. Thanks to the audience for some great questions. And thanks to everybody behind the scenes at Mountain who helped to put all of this together. We hope you all found the information helpful and informative. Remember that you'll receive a copy of the webinar as well as the deck in your email box tomorrow. Stay tuned to MediaPost's website and digital publications in your inbox for more informative webinars to come from other valuable MediaPost partners in the weeks and months to come. Thanks so much to everybody for joining us today. We'll see you next time, and stay safe out there. Thank you and take care.